Hello. Today I'm gonna tell you about 88 KWK-43 L71. This is a gun that it doesn't have bad penetration, but the penetration it's not nearly as good as it should be. Now some people they don't care much about realistic penetration values, especially they will even laugh to the fact that I'm complaining about penetration values in World of Tanks, an arcade game. But reality is, wargaming actually uses realistic penetration values. They just happen to use the wrong ones, for most part. And in the case of the KWK-43 L71, these penetration values of 203 and 237, they happen to be somewhere. And if you check, for example, on Wikipedia, on the 88 KWK-43, you can see that 202 and 238, which is very close to penetration values in World of Tanks, are realistic penetration values, but for a 30 degree, for a plate angled at 30 degrees, not for a plate unangled at 90 degrees. Because for such a plate, the penetration would be 232 and an amazing 304. Now, some people might claim this is for balance purposes, but is it for balance reasons? I'm not saying give it 304 penetration with APCR. That's not what I'm saying. But the thing is, the 223 and 261, it's actually much closer to the realistic penetration values that the L71 should have. So if the L71 had these penetration values, then the L100 would have even better penetration values, which would make the Panther II not so bad tank, because currently it is among the worst tanks in the game. At tier 8 mediums, it's one of the worst. It's not like it's unplayable, it's just, I believe every tier 8 medium tank should have the same ability to impact the outcome of the battle. And currently you have tanks like the Centurion 5-1 rack or the Progetto M35, which can impact the outcome a lot more. And where you compare, I don't even need to go very far to see that the Panther II, it's useless as it is and has nothing to redeem itself. If I compare Panther II to the, for example, P44 Pantera, which has a similar profile, has a similar level of protection of armor, you get the same damage per minute, because the P44 Pantera has the same rate of fire, at least on the last shell, and nothing forces you to unload the clip. But unloading the clip, it's just a huge advantage, right? But the Panther II has really bad mobility. And what does it get as an advantage? It is way less mobile, and mobility, it's a huge advantage in World of Tanks, because it allows you to be where you need to be, when you need to be, or more importantly, it allows you to get out of positions where you don't want to be. So you have way less mobility and similar level of armor, and when it comes to rate of fire, when it comes to actually dealing damage, it's very similar, with the disadvantage of not having the amazing clip that the P44 has, which you can just go in, you unload the clip, and then you get out, and you have just dealt a lot of damage. You can just do that, or you can not do that and just play like a regular Panther II with 7.67 seconds between shots. Because that's what you would get the same damage per minute. So the P44 Pantera literally can do everything a Panther II can and more. It just gets a bit worse gun handling, but the clip and the mobility make up for it immensely. And the P44 Pantera, it's not even the best tier 8 medium by far. If you compare P44 to to a Progetto M35, because nowadays premium tanks just need to be superior. And notice this. Notice at the amount of premium tanks. I just chose tier 8 medium tanks, and it's just most tier 8 medium tanks are premiums. There are some double ones, so this isn't perfectly accurate, but it's mostly accurate. So the P44 Pantera does have armor, which the Progetto doesn't, but the armor level, it's only effective against lower tier tanks, tier 6 and tier 7, and only the turret armor is actually gonna bounce something. And that's mostly if they are not using gold ammunition. While the Progetto won't be able to bounce much, it is better at what it does more often, which is shooting, because it only has 2 shots only has 2 seconds between shots, inter-clip, and it gets very gnarly. And while the mobility might seem superior, it actually isn't, because Progetto gets the best terrain resistance in the game. 0.38, 0.48, 0.96, this is ridiculous, and you will have a really hard time finding a tank with better terrain resistance than this. This terrain resistance, especially the soft here of 0.96, this means a lot, because in maps like Lakeville, where you go, if you go line 2, you will notice your tank will slow down immensely, because it's swamp terrain. The Progetto will go through that area so much fast, it goes really fast, really fast. Just so you understand the level of unbalance nowadays in this game. If I compare the MX-CDC to the M3546, you see that the MX-CDC has an amazing 35 horsepower. We are talking about a completely paper tank, even more paper than the Progetto, even easier to penetrate, and much bigger. It's huge. And the gun has the same properties, 212, 259, 212, 259. So it could at least make use of its amazing power-to-weight ratio, which was one of its characteristics, realistically. But Wargaming, what did they do? In their infinite wisdom and amazing ability to be unable to balance the game ever, they just gave it insanely bad terrain resistance. It's more than 3 times worse than on the Progetto M46, which makes this power-to-weight ratio completely unrealistic, because it just doesn't work like that. You are really slowed down by a bullshit hidden statistic, because you can't even see these important values using in-game features. You need to use a program, a website like TanksGG, to look at these important details, because if you just compare the two tanks, like in the in-game comparison, you won't see how much different this. You won't see this difference, which has an immense impact. And then even on the accuracy, aiming time, and gunneling, it's worse. Anyway, amazing balance, right? So the Panther 2 currently has no redeeming features, and so what I was saying is that its penetration values, which are realistically wrong, because it's the wrong realistic values, they could be much better. They could be much similar to these penetration values, which would make the L100, which would force Wargaming to increase even further the penetration values of the KWK L100. But if you are gonna increase the penetration values, it would quite likely give it the best penetration with AP shell on the L100. Now, of all tier 8 medium tanks, it would get the best penetration with regular ammo. I don't know, like 240 for example. Would it be overpowered? I don't think so. It's still a Panther 2. It's still a slow tank with not that with no real armor that actually works. So it just would have as a redeeming feature the ability to penetrate a lot. And for the APCR, if it penetrates 261 now, and that would become the penetration of the L71, for the L100 it could go possibly to 100, 280 or even 290. And you might be thinking that's way too much. That's just too much. It's not. It's not too much. And I'll show you why it's not too much. Because you have a tier 8 medium tank which penetrates 330. So it's a tier 8 medium tank. It has existed in the game for a very long time. It's not necessarily an overpowered tank in a way. At least most people don't see it as such. I think it is one of the best tier 8 medium tanks in the game, because it has amazing gun handling and has an amazing gun with 330mm of penetration, which allows you to deal much easily with higher tier tanks. And even on armor protection, I would say it's an armor protection that is similar, if not better, than the Panther 2, because at least the turret ends up being overall more effective. Sure, you have a turret in the back with no gun depression whatsoever, but you get used to it. If you are a good player, you just make it work, and you make it work really well. So, if this tank can get 330, why can't the Panther 2 get a lot more penetration but still be lower than that? And it's not the only tank that penetrates a lot. If we look at the SDA1, you get 275mm penetration on the 8 shells. So is there any real reason why a Panther 2 can penetrate a lot more? Now, the other tank that penetrates more than what is normal, it's the M26 Pershing. Penetrates 268, which it's just 10mm above what you usually see wargaming values for tier 8 medium tanks. Wargaming gives a lot of 212, 258, which are just standard values that are being used out of laziness, not out of balanced reasons. I'm gonna show you now in War Thunder that some penetration values are realistic and some penetration values are not, that Wargaming is using. War Thunder currently uses a calculation for the penetration values. Instead of using instead of relying solely on documents, they just use a calculation, an equation method, whatever, to get penetration values. The reason why they do that, it's because sometimes the documents, some of the penetration values are not realistic because they were based on, they were influenced by propaganda, basically that. Anyway, the M26 Pershing in World of Tanks penetrates 190 and 168. And the gun on the M26 Pershing, it's the 90mm T15E2, which we can find here on the T32 in War Thunder. It's actually the T15E2 M2, but I'm quite sure the M2 it's just a wargaming invention. Or if there was any real difference, it wasn't in actual performance. Because, for example, the Super Pershing uses T15E1, and it has the same penetration values as on the T15E2. So the T15E2, it gets 207 and 218 with AP shells, which in World of Tanks it's lower with regular ammunition. It's only 190, but on the APCR in World of Tanks it gets 268, while realistically it would be even lower, only 266, and in World of Tanks you get 268. So in World of Tanks, the M26 Pershing gets a huge difference in penetration between AP and APCR. But the APCR penetration is quite realistic. So another gun that we can look and see how realistic penetration is, it's the 45mm DCA-45, the gun on the MX-80C. And that gun can be found in War Thunder on the Bad Chat, the MX-M4, or the L44, and it's the exact same gun with the exact same penetration because it uses the exact same shell. It doesn't get an APCR shell in War Thunder, but the penetration for the AP, it's 212, which is the exact same in World of Tanks. So you get 212, which is the realistic penetration according to War Thunder, and you get that penetration in World of Tanks. It's the realistic penetration. Another gun that I looked at was the STA, the gun of the STA-1, which is the 90mm Type 61, and it can be found on the Type 61. Now, realistically, in World of Tanks, it penetrates. It doesn't penetrate to realistic values, but it penetrates values that are balanced and adequate for World of Tanks, but still higher than the average. So in War Thunder, it penetrates less than in World of Tanks. It only penetrates 180 or 189, because this is actually an M3 gun, and I think it's the Type 61 gun. It's a modified American gun. I think I can find it here on the STA. See, 90mm M3A1. It's an American gun, and the AP penetration of this gun was it's around those values. This one gets the amazing APCR and an inferior heat shell. So what you get in World of Tanks is that you get 218, which is above what it should have for AP shell. According to Wargaming, it's for balance purposes, and then it gets an heat shell that penetrates above the normal. Usually they penetrate 250, and in World of Tanks it penetrates 275. Its realistic penetration was in fact 320. Now, would it make the STA-1 and the STA-2 overpowered to have an heat shell penetrating this much? Don't forget there is the Object 416 that penetrates even more than this at tier 8. As a tier 8 medium, it penetrates 330. 10 millimeters more. And finally, because this is it, I was creating this video because of the 88 L71, we come to the 88 L71. 88 L71, the KWK 43, penetrates with normal ammunition 227, which is much closer to the penetration of the L100, and 270. In World of Tanks, what do you get? You get 202 and 237. Why? Apparently, according to some, it's for balance reasons, as far as I'm concerned, and because it's consistently like this. It's not for balance reasons. It's because Wargaming is just trying to make German guns, German tanks, look worse and look bad. That's it. It's not for balance reasons whatsoever. So it's bullshit, and that's it.